I think one of the main things that I'm learning is like, even though stablecoins are this kind of default global technology, the way in which they're being adopted and used and spent and the problems that they're solving can be vastly different market by market as well. So it really does take this like nuanced, like bottom-up approach to understand how it's going to solve problems depending on the market you're in.
As the founder of The Flip, he is producing a new documentary series focused on stablecoin adoption at the last mile, bringing to life the stories of how people from all around the globe are using this technology to solve everyday problems. Justin, Norman, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with that transition and just how you guys are doing this all morning in general.
That means so much to come from a filmmaker like yourself.
If you have any tips, by the way.
Well, everything in film, everything is edited, so it's not live, right? It makes it much easier, in my opinion. Yeah.
Do you think I need a key light over here is the real question?
The lighting, I use my production team tells me what to do. You know?
Okay, Sam, you look great.
Thank you.
You
Sam,
do.
That's all that matters.
great.
Yes,
Justin, you look great.
Thank you.
Let's get into the conversation now. I love that you are traveling around the world and talking to people about stablecoins. You know, Sam and I spoke very briefly about how it's impacting folks. Largely in the developing world where the financial system has forgotten about a lot of people. Talk to us a little bit about what you're learning as you produce these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in stablecoins in the developing market context in particular, just because those are the problems, those are the markets where there's like real problems to solve, right? I think even though now kind of after the Genius Act in the US, people are kind of understanding what stablecoins could be good for in the US, it's very obvious in places like Argentina or Bolivia or Nigeria or now Nepal even, right? The role that stablecoins are playing and like what the job to be done is. And, you know, but I don't think that the conditions on the ground are well understood, right? So people will say Argentina hyperinflation, but if we really want to solve problems in Argentina with stablecoins, we really need to understand the context. And that's, I think, one of the main things that I'm learning is like, even though stablecoins are this kind of default global technology, the way in which they're being adopted and used and spent and the problems that they're solving can be vastly different market by market as well. So it really does take this like nuanced, like bottom-up approach to understand how it's going to solve problems depending on the market you're in.
Let's stick in Argentina for just a second. Explain that context, because that's a story we hear a lot in this industry about how crypto is solving problems for folks in Argentina, but we don't really get to dive into it deeper.
So I'm going to be a little bit maybe counterintuitive here. Everyone talks about Argentina and hyperinflation, right? But when you spend time on the ground and you ask why are people using stablecoins or why do they prefer dollars in the first case, hyperinflation is maybe the third thing on the list. They'll say like taxes and government overreach. There's a long history of, I think, dollar preference as a result of lack of trust and taxation and different things like that. And stablecoins are now playing a role. Especially in helping move money across borders in the Argentinian context. But as a result of this narrative, when I was going to Argentina, I had this expectation that I'd see much more visible stablecoin adoption, like prices in USDT or merchants accepting. And you don't really see that much of that. Like it feels like a regular economy. People are all spending in pesos. If they're spending in USDT or USDC, they're off-ramping into pesos. They're kind of doing Mercado Pago QR, right? And so I think that that's a good example of like, I went with this expectation that it would be more on chain than any other place I went to. And I actually left thinking that the future is more of this entanglement and intertwined stablecoin fiat, you know, being able to move between them a lot easier and cheaper. Even though we're telling the story of Argentina is the most on chain and the best place for stablecoin adoption, obviously the actual reality is a lot more nuanced and complex than that.
You know, Justin, when I think about great documentaries, I think about that there's often a tension there. I think about that you have a sort of a hero and villain moment. What's the real sort of, what's the friction you're running into that you're seeing these communities trying to overcome?
Yeah. So I think it depends also on what market we're talking about. In Argentina, it's actually this tension between like formal and informal, right? So there's this whole parallel market that people operate in because they have to, right? Because the history of Argentina, monetary policy and taxation has meant that you have to reside over here or else like your business isn't going to survive. Like people were saying to me, 30% of the informal 30% of the economy, if they didn't operate informally, they couldn't exist in Argentina, right? And they don't want to operate informally, but like there's a reason why the parallel market exists and it thrives, and there's this tension between formal and informal, this like really gray line between legal and illegal also, I think, that maybe kind of resonates with stablecoins and crypto adoption as well. In a place like Bolivia, I was in Argentina a couple weeks ago, I was in Bolivia about a week and a half ago. In Bolivia, it's like dollar access for survival. There's massive dollar shortages in Bolivia right now. I met with like a 30-year importer, a 30-year-old business that's importing agricultural products. They have to use stablecoins in order just to continue their business and to survive, right? So this tension between, we're this regular, formal, family-owned business, and now we're learning how to adopt this new technology. It's actually like kind of a lifesaver for us. That tension is an interesting one as well. And there's more that I can do, but those are two recently that come to mind.
You talk about that blurry line between legal and illegal, especially in Argentina. I was there last year for another event, another broadcast like this one, and I noticed the same thing you did. A lot of folks were using stablecoins, but no one was talking about it, and it almost felt like this like dark underbelly.
Yeah.
But everyone was participating in it.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not just like stablecoin adoption as this dark underbelly, but it's this entire parallel market of dollars and cash that is, in Argentina, the second most amount of physical dollars in circulation outside of the US are in Argentina, right? And so there's this entire thing that stablecoins are now plugging into that's not just about that, but I think it's like, if you, for example, during a period of hyperinflation chose to sell your pesos into dollars, you couldn't do that through the bank because either the bank didn't give you access or because the parallel rate was better, right? So you chose to use the informal market, and then your money exists outside of the system, which a lot of people want. If you then wanted to put that back into the bank, which a lot of people don't want to do because they don't trust banks, but let's say you wanted to, and then you wanted to participate in the formal system again, you have to kind of show how did you earn these dollars, right? And you can't do that because you bought them informally. And so that's this idea about this tension is like, you might have run a legitimate business, earned in pesos, moved your money out, if you want to move it back in, right? Like that tension of like, is that money laundering? Like, I don't know if it is, right? But there's like a very legitimate reason why people are participating in this parallel economy. And I think also like as an American, I lived in South Africa for 10 years and have traveled and spent a lot of time in East and West Africa. I think that sort of tension of like what looks sketchy to like the West is often just business as usual or how you have to operate in some of these markets. I don't think that that's very well understood. I don't know if it's legal or not. I don't know if Argentinians think it's legal or not. They just say, I don't have a choice, right?
I think that's a fascinating topic. It also makes me wonder if, like, we've already said stablecoins 95 times since we started this broadcast, but that's like, I mean, it makes me feel like we're talking about SMTP or like MP4s when we talk about music. I wonder if there's almost a brand change that has to happen on the ground for people just to say, no, it's just money.
Yeah.
Is there any insight you have in that?
I would agree, yeah. I mean, I walked around Argentina and asked people if they knew what stablecoins were, and they said no, and then I said USDT, and some said, oh, yeah. But I do think it's like, I mean, thinking about it as just money. I was in another just anecdote, I was in the airport in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and the duty-free shop had all of the prices in USDT, but they didn't accept USDT. Oh. So for some, I don't know why, but for some reason, maybe they wanted to and they couldn't figure out merchant acceptance. But yeah, I guess they're just kind of thinking about, like in some markets, they do kind of think interchangeably about like USDT, USD, it's the same thing. In that store, they only accepted dollars in cash or Zelle, interestingly enough. So I guess I had a US bank account, but I agree with you, right? Like, it's the way in which it's being utilized in many of these markets is interchangeable with cash, and in some ways is just a more like readily used version of cash. You can do more with it, and that I think is what the future should look like. Is just using it for the same reasons why you might use cash, but you can do a lot more with it than you can do with cash.
Justin, thanks so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us at the desk. I'm sure we'll see you around and we'll catch up on the next episode.
Yes, thanks so much.